Dobrodošli na današnjem predavanju in okrogli mizi. Zelo zanimive gostje, profesorice dr. Susan Handy. Današnje srečanje organizira skupina za transformativno prometno načrtovanje Urbanističnega inštituta Republike Slovenije in sicer v okviru projekta Life IP Care for Climate oziroma Samo en planet je slovenski naziv tega projekta, ki nam omogoča, da vabimo tuje strokovnjake, da nam pomagajo s težavami, s katerim se bolj ali manj uspešno soočamo v našem prostoru glede načrtovanja prometa, prostora in prepleta med temi dvemi načrtovanji. To switch to English, because English will be an official language today. So welcome our guests to our today's event, the lecture and the round table. The event is organized by our group of transformative transport planning at the Urban Planning Institute of Republic of Slovenia. Within the project Care for Climate. This is a project that allows us to invite foreign experts to help us overcoming barriers with challenges we are facing regarding transport planning and spatial planning and their intertwining. I think it's best to begin, so I'm passing the word to our host today.
Hvala lepa. Luka Mladenovič, član skupine za transformativno prometno načrtovanje. Torej, dame in gospodje, good afternoon and warm welcome. My name is Nataša Briški and I will be guiding you through today's program. First, a keynote lecture, then followed by a roundtable discussion. So when we talk about transportation in Slovenia, we often think of two things, like traffic jams and frayed nerves. Today, however, we'll talk about how things could be different, how transport can be seen not just as movement, but as part of how we live and share our public space. So our guest today is Professor Susan Handy, one of the most influential voices in transportation planning. She teaches at the University of California, Davis, where she led the National Center for Sustainable Transportation and the graduate program in Transportation Technology and Policy. Her work connects research and practice and asks uncomfortable questions, like does building more roads really reduce congestion? Her latest book, Shifting Gears Towards a New Way of Thinking About Transportation, challenges us to rethink mobility, to shift focus from cars to people, from speed to accessibility. She received an honorary doctorate from Delft University of Technology in 2025 and was a keynote speaker at the Transportation Research Board Conference in 2024. In her lecture, Shifting Gears Towards a More Equitable and Sustainable Transportation System, Professor Handy will explore how the US transportation model works, how it's built on freedom, speed, and capacity, created, of course, deep car dependence. Whoever's been to US knows what I'm talking about, and how that mindset is slowly but also surely beginning to change. So, Professor Handy, welcome, and we are looking forward. The floor is yours. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I am so pleased to be here, and I want to thank the Institute and my hosts for making it possible for me to visit your beautiful country and this very beautiful city. And I have to say, this is the most beautiful room I have ever given a lecture in. So thank you all for being here. I'm going to talk about the critical question for the transportation field, which is how do we achieve a more equitable and sustainable transportation system? And I am going to talk about the situation in the U.S. and California in particular. California is a very different place than Slovenia. But in the 24 hours I've been here, I get the sense that you are facing many of the same challenges that we are. So I look forward to sharing these thoughts with you, but also about hearing your thoughts in the discussion that will follow. So the first point I want to make is that the U.S. has, admittedly, built a pretty amazing transportation system. So in California alone, we have over 26,000 lane miles of freeways. We have 27 million and now more licensed drivers. We have over 30 million cars and trucks on our roads. All of that adds up to a whole lot of driving, which we measure in terms of vehicle miles of travel. So 310 billion vehicle miles of travel in California every year. We do have some transit as well. We have over 200 transit systems throughout the state that serve 1.3 billion trips per year. And again, this adds up to quite a lot of, in this case, person miles of travel. And, of course, people also walk and bike. So our population of nearly 40 million people a few years ago made as many as 6 billion walking and bike trips, adding up to, again, quite a bit of miles of travel. That's just the passenger travel. We also, of course, serve freight and what we call goods movements. We have 12 ports in California serving 192 million tons of freight every year. Trucks are all over our freeways, and we have a network of primary freight routes that they make use of. And then, of course, we have airports, in our case, 10 major airports within the state. So this really is a very impressive system that, of course, is essential to our economy and to our daily lives. But my second point is that it is also problematic in many ways. And the primary challenge is that the vast majority of our daily travel is by car and what we call light trucks, with very little travel by transit and even less travel by walking and biking when you measure things in terms of the distance traveled rather than the number of trips. So all of this car travel, of course, creates sustainability concerns. In the U.S., transportation accounts for 21% of greenhouse gas emissions. That percentage is even higher in California because we don't have to use so much fuel to heat our homes because we have pretty nice weather. And then within that transportation segment, cars and trucks account for over 80% of those transportation emissions. But of course, climate change isn't the only sustainability challenge that our very car-dependent system creates. So air pollution, water pollution, safety concerns, access to basic goods and services for people who are not well served by this very car-dependent system. Our system is not terribly resilient to the kind of severe weather events that we will increasingly be facing. Our system goes hand in hand with our sprawling patterns of development They reinforce each other and continue to make the problem worse. Our system is not so great for non-humans, and I have colleagues who look at the implications of our transportation system for wildlife and other ecological impacts. And then, of course, equity. Our system is inherently inequitable in that not everybody has access to a car or is able to drive a car. And when we think about the system from a personal standpoint, it's clear that driving a car, while it certainly gives us many freedoms, is also a significant burden on our lives. So the cost of owning and operating a vehicle is quite high and getting higher. The average price of a new vehicle in the U.S. has now topped $50,000, and that includes just a little bit of tax. That is mostly just the cost of the vehicle itself. Most Americans, nevertheless, do have a car. Only 10% of households in the U.S. do not own a vehicle. Of course, the percentage is much higher for lower income households, so around 25% of households making less than $25,000 per year in the U.S. Do not own a vehicle and are not well served by the system because we have such limited transit. But I like to turn this statistic around and think about the fact that what this means is that 75% of households with incomes under $25,000 a year do own a vehicle at very high expense. And they do so because that's really the only way they can make their daily lives work. And that means that the car is not just about freedom, but that it really is a burden on our lives. Okay, so the next point to make is that we need to be doing something about this. And we need to be doing something about this now. We can't wait. We cannot afford to wait. And of course, the main reason we cannot afford to wait is because of the contribution of this car-dependent system to our climate change crisis. And I don't need to, I think, convince you of this, I hope. Although I regret to say that our current federal administration is not terribly convinced about that. And that is something that I sincerely apologize for on behalf of the world. But I am happy to say that, at least in California, we are trying to do something about this. So California has had policy about climate change in place for at least 20 years, going back to Governor Schwarzenegger. And we have been trying to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions in all sectors. We have made some progress, as you can see here, but we still have a long ways to go to get to the targets we need to meet to really make a difference in the climate crisis. So a big way that California has been working on this within the transportation sector is to shift towards zero-emission vehicles, and we've made lots of progress here. Again, we've adopted pretty ambitious policies about this. So we have the Advanced Clean Cars 2 rule, which set a goal of, well, a requirement for 100% of new cars sold in California by 2035 to be zero-emission vehicles. And we're getting there. You see a lot of electric vehicles on the road. This is a bit in danger at the moment, I should note, though, because we are only able to do this if the federal government says we are allowed to do this. And they're obviously not so interested in us doing this at the moment. So we'll see where this goes. But in the meantime, there is quite a movement toward electric vehicles. And I think even without this requirement, the buying public is very interested in electric vehicles as well. But all the analysis the state has done shows that this shift to electric vehicles is not going to be enough. That if we're going to meet our targets for reducing greenhouse gas emissions, we are also going to need to reduce driving. And again, we measure driving as vehicle miles traveled, or the big buzzword is VMT. We talk about VMT all day long. And here again, the state has set some ambitious targets. So we're aiming for a 25% reduction in VMT per capita by 2030 and a 30% reduction, this is below 2019 levels, by 2045. You can see the trends there. It was steadily going up. We hit COVID, it went down, and now it's going back up. So that's not looking so good. And then another thing to note is that even in the pandemic, when people were required to be staying at home and not going places so much, we did not meet the targets for reductions in VMT. So, this is a really big challenge to think about. What is it going to take to get people to drive less? Now, part of the reason why it's important for people to drive less, because oftentimes I get the question, if everybody's converting to electric vehicles, can't we just keep driving? Why do we need to reduce our driving? Well, of course, because there are lots of greenhouse gas emissions associated with things like providing the pavement that the cars drive on and so on and so forth. But also because we have some other big crises at the moment as well. One that I believe does not get enough attention is the safety crisis. We made some good progress on reducing fatalities on our highways over many decades, thanks to improvements in vehicles and various kinds of safety technologies. But the progress has stalled a bit, and regardless of which direction we're going, the fact that over 46,000 people in the United States die on our highways every year should not be acceptable to us. The crisis for people on our roads outside of vehicles is even greater. We are seeing steady increases in pedestrian fatalities, and not just in absolute numbers, but also in the rate of pedestrian fatalities. And I'd be happy to talk more about why we think this is, but the short answer is it has a lot to do with the growth in the size of the vehicles that Americans are choosing to drive. So we need to be doing something, and we need to be doing it now. The fourth point I want to make that I think is very important to this whole discussion is that we will not achieve the kind of transformation we need if we do not shift our thinking in a big way. And that's what I'm going to spend the rest of the session talking about. So when I say a shift in thinking, I mean a shift in thinking among everyone who's involved in shaping the transportation system. And that's really everybody when you think about it. It's the professionals, it's the policymakers, it's the public, it's various sorts of other organizations out there who have a stake in all of this. We all shape the transportation system in some way, directly or indirectly. But I do think professionals are an especially important group to focus on because they're the ones who carry out the day-to-day work of designing and planning and building and operating and maintaining our transportation system. And they also have quite a bit of influence, maybe not, on decision makers and the public and so on. So I will talk about shifting thinking within the profession in particular. In my recent book, what I did was take a look at how the profession thinks about the work that it does. What are the ideas that underlie policies, practices, the day-to-day work that our transportation professionals are doing? And I look at this set of ideas in the book that are really very traditional ideas and are really at the core of the work. And I'm going to go through a few of these, but not all of these, but I will come back to a few of them. And what I mean by they're really at the core of the work is that they are embedded in the guidance that dictates what decisions get made and how systems get designed and all of that. So this is maybe true here as well, but we have certain documents, guidebooks, that are hugely influential within the profession. The Highway Capacity Manual, which has a lot to do with capacity, obviously. Manual on Uniform Traffic Control Devices, which is all about signals and bike lanes, things like that. And then what we call the Green Book, which dictates how we physically design our roadways. And if you look at these documents, you will see these traditional ideas embedded in them. And it may be implicit more than it is explicit. But these traditional ideas are in there and thus are influencing what it is that the professionals are doing. Now, the interesting thing is that if you look at the latest versions of these documents, you can see some signs of change, that there's some new thinking sort of coming into these documents that looks different from that older traditional way of thinking. So the other thing I do in the book is go through for each one of these traditional ideas, what's the alternative idea out there? What's another way to think about it? And in all these cases, these ideas are not new. These are things that at least some people in the profession have been talking about for a long time. It's just that they've never become the overriding, widely accepted idea within the profession the way the traditional ideas have dictated what we're doing. And the important thing to note is that if you look at those traditional ideas, what they add up to is a focus on making it easier to drive. Whereas if we were thinking in the alternative sort of way, if we adopt this alternative set of ideas, those add up to the goal of making it easier and safer not to drive. So it's a very different way of thinking. Now, to make this all maybe make a little more sense, let's look at a couple of these ideas, traditional ideas, and then some of the alternative way of thinking. So I'm going to start with mobility, because that's really a lot of what we focus on in the transportation field. And when I say mobility, what I mean is the ease of movement. And when the profession focuses on mobility, what they're doing is sort of putting in place the goal of movement, maximizing movement, facilitating movement. Now, the corollary to the goal of movement is the idea that congestion is bad, because congestion is the opposite of movement, right? When we have congestion, it is much less easy to move. And my latest obsession is the congestion obsession. I mean, if you look at what we are doing in the profession, it completely centers around this concern for congestion and the belief that we need to be reducing congestion. This is not a new idea that congestion is bad. In fact, you can find lots of talk about the evils of congestion going way back, as some of my colleagues have documented at various times in various places. Los Angeles, They've been fighting congestion for over 100 years now. They've been trying to solve that problem. And if you've been there, you know they have not been terribly successful at that. There are lots of reasons why we might think of congestion as evil or as something we want to reduce. Nobody likes congestion, right? And there are measurable negative effects of congestion. Congestion causes stress, which affects our health and our quality of lives. It reduces worker productivity. There's lost economic activity because of congestion, and so on and so forth. And we have researchers in the U.S. who, on an annual basis, put all the data together and quantify what is that negative economic effect of all of that congestion that we have. So it is maybe not a surprise that our primary measure of the performance of the transportation system is this thing that we call level of service, or LOS, level of service measures. And it really is just a function of the volume of traffic relative to the capacity of the facility. So I think of it as the volume to capacity ratio, or the V over C ratio. So the more volume you have relative to the capacity, the worse the congestion. And what's important about this is that if we use this as our performance measure, then this is what we focus on in our efforts to plan and design this system. And again, I could say more about this, but this has led to, if you're trying to improve the volume to capacity ratio, what's an easy way to do that? You increase the capacity. Okay, I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But here's the problem. Movement, we might think movement is a good thing, but really it's not the ultimate goal of what we're doing. The purpose of our transportation system is not simply to move people, it's to get people where they need to be, to get them to the activities they need and want to participate in. And that's a concept we call accessibility. Again, this is not a new idea. People were talking about this decades ago and pointing out that we shouldn't just be focusing on movement, we really need to be thinking about accessibility. And there are efforts to develop ways of measuring accessibility and kind of shifting the focus to evaluating how good a job we're doing with respect to what's the impact on accessibility. And lots could be said there as well. The importance of focusing on this idea of accessibility is that it points out that while movement is important from the standpoint of achieving accessibility, it's not the only way to achieve accessibility. And that another way we can more easily get what we need is by bringing it closer to us. So you may have heard of this concept of the 15-minute city that the mayor of Paris popularized, but lots of other communities have adopted this idea or similar versions of this. This is a very different way of thinking. Instead of thinking about how do we add capacity to make it easier to move, we think about how can we make things more convenient for people? How can we put the things that people need within a closer distance that helps to lessen their need to travel and also makes it possible to maybe walk and bike to get what you need? Okay, that traditional focus on mobility goes along with a traditional focus on capacity and the idea that it is the job of the transportation professional to provide enough lanes to accommodate all of the demand that exists. And really, you can see this kind of thinking in so much of what we do. So we talk about the predict and provide approach, which started back in the 50s and is still how we're planning our system today. We use our travel demand forecasting models to tell us where congestion is likely to be 20, 30 years in the future, and then that's where we plan to put the capacity. with the goal of making sure that our level of service stays at an acceptable level, and that congestion is not going out of control. We are still doing this today. I love this quote, hate this quote from the executive director of the Texas Department of Transportation, who says that work will never conclude. It's a never-ending thing. And, I have to wonder, can we really do that? That is just not sustainable. Yet that's the way we think. The demand is going to grow. We have to add the capacity. And of course, what all of that ignores is this phenomenon known as induced travel. This is what happens when we add capacity. When we add capacity, we're essentially reducing the cost of driving. And what do people do when you reduce the cost of a product? They consume more. This is a phenomenon that, again, transportation planners identified a century ago, back when cars were first appearing on our roads. But we seem to have put it out of our minds and not really adequately accepted what this implies for our very traditional way of thinking about transportation. By now, we have lots of robust evidence that this phenomenon occurs, and also that what the magnitude of that effect is. And in fact, what the research shows is that if you expand a freeway by 10% in terms of its capacity, within about 5 years, you will see a 10% increase in traffic travel on that freeway, independent of whatever else is going on in terms of the economy and the population. In other words, within about 5 years, you're back to where you were in terms of congestion on that freeway. You are accommodating more driving, which actually in official planning practice is seen as a very good thing. There's a benefit there, and that's why we build the freeway. But what it means is you're not getting the kind of congestion reduction that your policymakers are telling you is the reason for building that project. So if we ignore the induced travel effect, we are overselling highway expansion as a strategy for reducing congestion. And we are also underestimating the negative environmental impacts that those facilities might have. So for me, this is a lot about misleading the public, that we are selling these projects based on congestion reduction that they are not going to achieve. This is a project in my own community, linking Davis to Sacramento, and that's what it used to look like. Right now, it's a mess because they're in the middle of adding 2 lanes to this already 6-lane freeway. And, the other thing that drives me crazy is that when these decisions get made, they ignore the 4, 5, 6 years of misery as the construction is going on. That we actually make things a whole lot worse for several years in order to make them better. And then that improved condition lasts for only a few years after that. Anyway, just recently, there was a 55-hour closure of this freeway while they were doing some of this construction. And you can imagine the kind of chaos that creates in this transportation system. And you can also see just how many freeways we have. Okay, so again, there's some glimmer of hope. There is some rethinking of freeways in some places. In Los Angeles, they canceled a long-planned freeway project not so long ago, decided to use that funding to do a lot of other things like investments in transit. I'm amazed by the recent vote in Switzerland, where the public voted against a whole set of highway expansion projects. So I think people are maybe starting to get it, that these projects are so expensive, and we get, in the end, not so much out of them. Okay, I think I need to speed up, and I'm on the topic of speed. Okay, why we hate congestion so much is we like speed. We like speed. Humans like speed. But also, we want to get places as quickly as we can. From a professional standpoint, we define speed as efficiency. We want to minimize the travel time it takes for people. Okay, seems perfectly reasonable. The problem is, of course, that speed comes at the expense of safety. So the faster that we are driving, the less safe it is, whether we are the drivers, but especially if we are the people outside of vehicles. So you may have seen graphics like this that show just how much more dangerous this all becomes if cars are going faster. And if the car is going 40 miles per hour and it's a large SUV, you're not going to have anybody left, right? None of the pedestrians are going to make it. So we do make some attempt to control speed. We set speed limits. In the US, we use this crazy thing called the 85th percentile rule to set speed limits, which essentially means that drivers are setting the speed limits themselves. We set the speed limit at the speed that 85% of the drivers are going. So the faster the drivers go, the higher we set the speed limit, rather than saying, here's what we want the speed limit to be, and setting it that way. Even when we set speed limits, that doesn't necessarily control speeding. We design our roads according to design speed. That's another professional practice. And, the guidance says we should design our roads to be as fast as possible while maintaining an acceptable level of safety. So it's really putting speed above safety. We design straight roads, wide lanes, clear zones. That reduces the risk of crashing, but when crashes happen, well, it also increases speeds, and then, faster speeds mean more dangerous crashes when they do happen. So we spend a lot of time doing things like traffic calming, which is using a whole bunch of different physical devices to try and slow down the traffic. And really what this is about is fixing the design mistakes we made originally. When we designed streets to be too wide and too fast, we need to go back in there and fix them. So we do all these sort of little jiggering things to try and make it safer. Okay, lots of other ideas in the book that I talk about, but I do want to say just a couple words about this one, technology. The idea that technology will solve all our problems. This has been a very popular idea in the profession. I think it's a very popular idea in the public because it's we can have our cake and eat it too approach, right? If technology fixes the problems, we don't have to change our behavior. We don't have to do anything different, and we'd much rather solve things that way. Technology has been very important to fixing problems in transportation. Certainly safety has improved because of technology. We've largely addressed the air quality problem through technological improvements. But it doesn't mean that every technological innovation is necessarily a good thing. And even when they solve some problems, they may create other problems. And one that the transportation field really needs to be thinking about right now is autonomous vehicles, which maybe are farther along in California than anywhere else. And it's happening, and we seem to just be letting it happen without really thinking about whether this is appropriate for our system or whether we need to be managing this innovation in a way that ensures that it's a net positive for our communities. So I think lots of questions, and we need a lot more caution around this than maybe we are currently exercising. So really, what future do we want is the big question. We can go driverless, or we can go driverless, right? This is a very different way to think about the future. And all of this, I think, kind of ties back to where I start in the book, which is the idea that the car gives us freedom. That's one way we can approach all of this. But we could also be thinking about finding ways to give us freedom from the car. And in the U.S., we do not have that. All right, so a whole set of traditional ideas that lead us towards making things easier to drive, that really focus on the car and prioritize the car over all else. If we adopt this alternative set of ideas, it's a completely different way of thinking, and it's about making it easier and safer not to drive. And, it's up to us to decide which of these ways of thinking we want, but we should be thinking about that future. Which of those futures do we want? And we need to shift our thinking to align with that. Now, what I think is happening in the U.S. is that you do see more and more of the thinking on the right, but you don't necessarily see less of the thinking on the left. So instead of a shift, we're seeing a layering of new ideas onto old ideas, and what we get is what I think of as the throw everything at it mentality. So we are investing in transit. We're making some big investments in transit, but we have not stopped building highways. So we're doing both things at once. And to me, this doesn't make a lot of sense because we're not really giving the new way of thinking a fair chance because they compete, right? The more, if we're widening the highway in the same corridor where we're investing all the money in the new transit system, we're undermining that investment in the transit system. And, of course, the it here is congestion, right? I mean, it all comes back to congestion, that's the preeminent concern, and the driving goal of all our efforts is reducing congestion. And that worries me, too, because, of course, there's this whole set of other challenges that I started with that if we're focusing on congestion, we may not be doing the right things with respect to these other challenges. Although I do think there's an opportunity here where actually if you think about it and you think about how would we address these challenges, if this was our priority, we might actually take care of that congestion problem. And we might take care of it maybe not by reducing congestion, but just by making congestion less relevant to our lives. If we give people alternatives to driving, then you don't care how congested the roadways are. All right, so my points. The U.S. has built an amazing transportation system. It is problematic. We need to make a transformation, and transformation is going to take a shift in thinking. We can continue to focus on making it easier to drive. I think we need to stop doing that and instead start focusing on making it easier to not drive. And then, of course, I need to make one final point here, is that the rest of the world should not follow our model, in my opinion, but should rather learn from our mistakes. And I think if you come to California and see how things work there, you will appreciate how we are not doing things maybe the way we should be. Unfortunately, the world seems to be following us. The trend in car ownership is up. I hear that it is quite high already in this country. This has to do with economic growth and income growth and human desires. It's not especially surprising. But this is something we need to deal with. And I will end on a more positive note, which is that again, there's some sign of movement in the right direction. There are cities like London and Paris that were heading in the, very much in a car-dependent sort of direction and have made the choice to reverse course and create a more balanced transportation system that gives its residents more options. So don't look to us as the model. Think about other parts of the world that are either avoiding car dependence or are finding ways to reverse their car dependence. And I will end there, and thank you very much. And I'm really looking forward to the discussion and then the questions that might follow that. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Handy, for this inspiring lecture and also thought-provoking. You've given us plenty to reflect on, so thank you very much. From the way the transportation system shape our lives to how we behave, being stuck in the patterns that might be from some other time. Thank you. Now we'll move to, please stay with us. So we'll move to bring some of your ideas closer to home, how they can be managed in the context of Slovenia. So it's the roundtable discussion titled Changing the Paradigm of Transport Planning in Slovenia. So please, whichever do you prefer, Professor? The topic that we will discuss about is also one of the main topics of the work of the Transformative Transport Planning Research Group. So please, joining us for the roundtable discussion is also Dr. Robert Rijavec from the Faculty of Civil and Geodetic Engineering, University of Ljubljana. Thank you. Dr. Marjan Lep, coming from the Faculty of Civil Engineering, Transportation Engineering and Architecture, University of Maribor. Thank you, sir. And also Dr. Aljaž Plevnik, head of the Transformative Transport Planning Group at the Urban Planning Institute of the Republic of Slovenia. So thank you very much to all of you. I'm looking forward to a discussion. We will leave, I won't say plenty of time, but definitely at least 15-20 minutes to your questions as well. We have time till 3 p.m. So I want to start with you, Dr. Plevnik. Professor Handy speaks about the shift from mobility to accessibility. Now, how do we understand that shift in the Slovenian context? Are we ready to drive less to simplify things?
Well, I don't think that's an easy concept to digest, especially in the professional rounds or among professionals. So it's not acceptable in general, but there are a few signs in this direction, especially on the city level. So quite a few cities are doing the right things, thinking about how to make cities less dependent on the cars, especially in the city centers. Ljubljana is quite famous now in the region for its city center arrangements. We will hear about Maribor, I guess, which did quite amazing steps in recent years with impressive results. So on the city level, I would say we are following this direction, although not fully understanding the concept of accessibility. But as Susan said before, we have this overlap of different approaches. Also on the city level, we do both closing city centers, but then expanding roads and parkings around the city center, bringing more cars. So these are concepts that are going on in parallel. But our main concern is on the national level. Here we see much less trends in this direction. Our main discussion at the moment is on expansion of the motorway system based on the congestion, which we heard a lot on today. And we are not working and investing and planning on alternatives in the same range of focus, money, investment. And this shout out for this kind of difference planning is around for 30 years since we got independent. But unfortunately, our main investment and focus in this period was on motorway expansion or building in the first period of time. So this is our main challenge, mainly on the national level, but also partly on the local, regional level.
Thank you. Dr. Jevec, what would you say are the main characteristics of the Slovenian transport system that distinguishes it from the Californian one or the American one, and to what extent do you think we are different?
Okay, thank you. This is very, very difficult question. So, Slovenian transport system and California one, I could say that there are many common things. Generally, we have cars, railways, and airplanes, and vessels. But in generally, I could say in Slovenia we have a little bit more European transport system. That's another question. What means European transport system? That means that we are thinking about those things that Professor Handy talked about before. So I could say that we are also car-independent society, but I think that for decades now, more than the decades, we are thinking to change something, especially in cities. On the other hand, we should be aware, while we are Slovenia, member of the European Union, so we have also the transport coming from abroad to Slovenia, and it's passing to neighboring countries. So at the moment we are living here in the, I would say, the social, political, changeable or transitional society. So all around us things are happening, and those things are influencing how our transport system is. So transport system at the moment is changing, but not so fast than society. I will not say in Slovenia, much more than in our nearby countries. So this is important thing, and I would say that in California they don't have such changes in such a short time. For example, Slovenia is 30 years old, and we have, so our I will not say fathers, but our preceders, they didn't know that we will be in such a kind of society in 2025. So it is very difficult to prognose and to predict what will happen. So, for example, my professor, he didn't expect that we will be in European Union and we will have so many opportunities and so many connections to the world, so that we will have the borderless country, and so the freedom of passing through the countries and so on. So that was not expected. So this is important things. I think that this is different. I would say also that our transport system is still in development. So it's not fixed like I would say it is in California. So also, as Ljaš said, so I don't agree with a decision that we will not build many new roads. We will do it. Why we didn't finish it? So we should do it. On the other hand, we will have problems with the maintaining the existing system, but we will have problems in the future with collapsing. So everything could collapse, especially in the Ljubljana. What else? So you mentioned autonomous vehicles. So autonomous vehicles we are not present in Slovenia. Good question. Why not? So generally this is the problem not only from Slovenia, but I would say the European one. So standard, the reliability, the other things, usually engineers, we don't think about them. So who will be the responsible if something happens, if there is a crash of such a kind of vehicle? So
not there yet.
These things are a little bit easier, I think, in California, especially you mentioned stakeholders, so the rules are in Slovenia quite complicated.
Thank you.
But
Dr. Leb, you often speak about the so-called induced traffic, that every new road eventually creates new congestion. Now, why is it still so difficult to accept that in practice? Or maybe I am wrong and we are comfortable with that.
No, you are not wrong. So I'm still under impression of lecture and a little bit depressed because tomorrow I will have to talk with citizens in Maribor and they will start like car is freedom, street are for cars, and we don't need speed limits, speed traps, and so on. So this is the problem. And of course, we know that we also have an experiment actually in Maribor because 8 years ago, we closed a very, very busy road in the city center. And we were very afraid what will happen. And now we are faced with a situation that there is really the opposite situation. So if we have induced, we also can have reduced traffic demand. And we are happy because the city is not dead. We have more people, more smiley faces on the street. And we didn't shift the traffic to the neighborhood road, to other roads. So, because I was involved in that process, I'm really happy, and these numbers are real, not a little bit manipulated today. So, reduced demand works. We have an experiment, and unfortunately, or not unfortunately, induced traffic demand works. So that's also very, in Slovenia we have regions which are underdeveloped and they want to have new roads, new motorways because this will induce traffic, this will induce businesses but I'm afraid that it will be the brain drain effect. But anyway, so induced traffic works for sure. Our task is to convince our citizens that reduced traffic demand also works.
Good luck with that. Professor Handy, when you listen to Slovenian experts, do you hear echoes of the same challenges that you had in California? I would assume yes, but maybe...
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it is obviously a very different situation, and you have the complexity of the... I guess sort of tourist traffic passing through the country, but the public sort of believing that cars are freedom and having that desire to own their own vehicle and be able to go where they want when they want, that seems to be a very universal thing and maybe at the very core of the challenge, right? Because that is true. I mean, it's reasonable that that's something that we as individuals desire. And then the challenge is to get people to think, I think in a larger sense about what that implies for our community. You know, when everybody has the car and we're focused on making sure that everybody is able to drive around and not get stuck in traffic, that leads to a particular kind of infrastructure with really significant impacts on our community in terms of the environment, noise and stress and ultimately quality of life. So, I think that's kind of what you're facing here, maybe, and it's what we're facing as well.
Yeah, you mentioned before we started with the lecture and the roundtable that you're doing the round in the European Union, some of the European countries. So are the things that you hear, I don't know, in Netherlands or where you came from, if I remember correctly, the same as for the start? Are you hearing here from in Slovenia? Like same challenges that everyone has in Europe?
Yeah, so I'm spending some time traveling around, experiencing transportation systems and cities in Europe, and have already been in the Netherlands for a bit, in London and Paris. And, in all three cases, I mentioned London and Paris earlier, but the Netherlands as well, they were really on the path towards car dependence and decided that was not the future that they wanted. And they turned it around, the Netherlands first, in terms of investing in the alternatives and creating a balanced system. It's not about getting rid of the car, but it's about managing how the car fits into our system and our communities and making sure that the alternatives work for as many people as possible. And I think it's fabulous.
Thank you. Dr. Plevnik, in her lecture, she's given a couple of ideas how things can be different now. Which ideas, in your opinion, from California or the US in general, would you think are most transferable to Slovenia? Which ones, might be a bit harder to apply?
Maybe I should talk about the need of transferability, not about the possibility to transfer. So my feeling is in this discussion that the acceptance of induced travel is something that we should transfer from California, because in acceptance and the real range of induced travel is part of their planning and decision-making system, and it's not the case in Slovenia. So their messages, although they are still doing the both direction planning, the message is that for us is we will definitely invest, and I agree with you. The expansion is not stoppable in Slovenia anymore. It will happen. But our message is in 10 years we will have more cars in the bigger congestion than we have today in 10 years' time. But in the meantime, we will not provide alternatives. That's what Susan is talking about Holland. So our focus is again mainly on motorway system, but there is some part on the alternatives, but far from enough that should give us access to things, because people are now avoiding trips because of the congestion on the motorways. Already we are avoiding going to the seaside over the weekend. We are avoiding to go for a meeting or visiting families in part of Slovenia because of congestions, and we do not have alternatives. And in 10 years, if we continue in this kind of transport planning, we will not have competitive alternative to the motorways. And that's our concern, and that's what we'll try to raise the voice about and change, shift the planning system towards.
What challenges do you feel are the highest ones?
I would go back to the scheme that Susan showed us. There are many elements in this transport shaping system, but at the moment we are focusing on the transportation professionals. Okay. Because we think that this is the first step. We have to shift our perspective in transport planning first. That will influence the decision making and slowly the general public, and that hopefully will turn the wheel toward the right direction.
Thank you. Dr. Rijavec, which long established approaches in our practice should be, in your opinion, re-examined, if we want, let's say, a fairer transport system?
Sorry. As was said many times today, so freedom private owned car. So yeah, we have it. So in Slovenia, 1.5 million driving licenses. So
1.5?
Why we have driving license? Maybe all of us should ask ourselves. So okay, we have cars. Can we use them or more efficiency maybe? So this could be challenge, and as it was mentioned many times, so active transport or active mobility and public transport. But generally we know public transports are not only buses and trains, so maybe the definition, especially in Slovenia, is not the right one. So we can use those cars as a public transport. How? That's a challenge. So that could be a challenge. For example, in In many other countries, I will not say in Slovenia, we have the shared transport services, for example. You have also in California, like taxi one, for example. But also in Slovenia, we have the service, students using prevozi.org, organizational. So they are picking like in carpooling and so. But in opposite, we don't have some special points where to pick them safely and so on. So this could be also a challenge, but to put some power also to promote these alternatives, how to use much more personal cars. And maybe next step, so also, for example, these cars need not only the road, they need also the parking place, for example. So this is also the challenge. So maybe when we are developing some, some residence area, is it possible that we use to development this residence area without the car? Or with a shared car. So at the moment, I don't know for the project in Slovenia, for example, the residential area without the private car. So that means shared car. Like we have lifts, for example, in skyscrapers, for example. Lifts are not owned by users, usually are in collective, like on collective transport. So maybe we think about cars also in this way.
Okay, Professor, please.
I think that's exactly right. Another way that, one way I would say that there is some parallel between California and Slovenia is that most of California is not very urban. We don't have the kind of densities where it would support trams and metros and things like that. And in lower density development, we have to get a lot more creative about how do we give people alternatives to driving. So whether it's using cars in different ways or thinking about different forms of transit. I love the little green buses in your pedestrian malls. That I haven't seen that anywhere. That's so clever. I mean, that's a way to make it possible for that pedestrian space to work for people without them having to have their own car. And also bicycles, getting creative about how we use bicycles in our system, and especially e-bikes, right? Because lots of potential there. So creative thinking is the message I got from what you said, and I think we need that and you need that.
Thank you, Dr. Lep. Let's talk about data and tools. Do we have enough of them in Slovenia for considering induced or evaporated traffic effects in new projects?
So
what do we have?
Yeah, what do we have? Because this meeting is more or less addressed to transportation professionals, because we are civil engineers and transportation engineers. So in the past, we did a lot of so-called transportation modeling. So all our investments, they must be proved, cost-benefit analysis, and we use models and to predict what will happen in 10, 20, 30 years. And if we are looking back now, all these models were completely wrong. They were so our colleagues, also ourselves, we were asked, please take the model, and we need results like this and this, that our motorway can be built. And it still happens today, so it's not a secret. So we have quite a lot of data. The question is how to use it, but the data are always something from the past. So we don't know how the travel or traffic behavior will change in the future.
But for planning purposes?
For the planning purposes, we can say, okay, we will have more and more cars, so we will travel longer because we still have suburbanization. Every people from cities want to go to somewhere to green suburbs. So we can put in this our models whatever we want. From the for the past, we know exactly what happened and what was wrong, but we are not very happy to make research why our predictions were wrong, because it's very personal sometimes. But for the future, I think we should really have an idea how our system of values in terms of traveling and traffic behavior will change. And if we believe to some directions, our traffic, our transportation models, our predictions will give completely different results as they are today. So let's see.
You're more optimistic.
Not, but we can do it, at least in academic society. Okay. We can do a lot of models, research, predictions, and models, and etc.
Thank you. Professor Handy, in your research, what tactics or approaches proved to be the most effective in changing the mindset?
Well, if I had the answer to that question, I would be much richer. Yeah.
Or maybe changing the minds of decision makers. What worked?
Well, I don't have the answer to that, and I think that's, the transportation profession, the researchers. We don't really study that. We've never thought about that as something that we need to be doing, is changing people's minds. So, we really need to be thinking in a multidisciplinary way. We need to be borrowing ideas from other fields like public health, where they have succeeded in changing attitudes and changing behavior around smoking and other harmful things. So I think there's a lot we can learn from those other fields. But my own feeling about this is that experience and experiencing different kinds of places may be one of the most powerful ways of changing people's minds. So if more Americans could come to Europe, I don't think you want us, but if more of them came and experienced what your cities are like, they might understand that there is a different or better way. If more Europeans came to California, we want you, so please come. And
you've become expensive.
What a nightmare. You were talking about Los Angeles.
It's so
a nightmare. Right.
And the traffic,
if you don't change your thinking, that could be where you're heading. Is that what you want? So, not very realistic, but I do think experience, and if we can think about small ways to give people those alternative experiences, that's a way to start changing.
Dr. Pleonik, so if you want to reflect on anyone's point, please just raise hands. Dr. Pleonik, where do you see progress in Slovenia, like any signs that indicates movement in the right direction, be it in terms of legislation, the strategies, the local practices? What would you point us to?
I've already mentioned cities. These are the good signs. And the other is on the national level. Since a few years, we now have a department for transport policy, which is based on the sustainability principles with bigger and bigger team, more and more projects, funding, guidance. We have a new law on comprehensive transport planning. All these are good signs, although we don't know how long will they last with the possible change of government. That might change, unfortunately. The dark side of this is that they are under the environmental ministry, but they should be with the infrastructure or transport ministry, so policy is developed in different ministries. But in general, this is a good sign, where you have administration developing in this direction, being more and more capable of changing the policies, funding. This is definitely a good sign, and we are approached by other countries in Europe to follow this idea of having this on the national level. I think this is in general, these are the good signs. And also within the profession, you see the crowd here today. This is also a good sign, listening to the new principles, and for such a small country, having such a big crowd is quite a good sign, I would guess.
For you experts based in Slovenia, working in Slovenia, do you feel heard when you have something to say regarding the transport system in Slovenia, heard by the government, the political parties? Do they listen to you?
I don't think so.
Not enough.
So maybe if you plan some infrastructure, for example, and if that infrastructure will not take some traffic demand, then you will be somehow in shame. You designed or you constructed the transport infrastructure, and there is no traffic on. So that could be a shock also for each transport planner and designer. In opposite, we design infrastructure that's traffic on. So, but the first thing I think it is then the shame also for the designers. So if you use the space, for example, and there is no traffic.
Dr. Plevnik, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I think we are hurt, but not always accepted.
Listen to.
Very often it takes years or decades to change perspective and to bring back the message you got 10 years ago. That's my experience. Sometimes some projects end without any acceptance or with a big opposition, but then you see same people 10 years after talking the same thing you taught them 10 years ago, and then the new things arrive. So I think it's worthwhile, it's successful, but it takes time, and you have to repeat things and shout loud and bring external experience, etc. We are heard but not accepted.
Would you agree, Dr. Lep?
Yes, of course, more or less. But anyway, when we talk to the decision maker on a local level or national level, there is always a question at the end of public money. How much will this cost, and where you will take this money from? And so ideas are good, programs are good, measures are fine, but let's wait for some funding. That's always the question. Or excuse, very often the excuse, we don't have funds for that, let's wait, and so on.
Another round.
But we are talking, at least in my city or also in Slovenia, we are asked quite a lot of time, what do you think?
Okay. So what do your, Dr. Lep, your research findings show? Which measures, you spoke a bit about that, which measures actually reduce traffic volumes rather than, just redirect flows elsewhere?
So let's be realistic.
Please.
So I can talk only about my city, Maribor, which is a very small city, particularly if we have Californian mega cities in our mind. So because of the past, that driving with car was very, very easy. Also on very, very short distances, parking was available almost for free. It was not so difficult in Maribor to close some roads, for example, because we find out that approximately 30% of car movements disappeared. That means we increased a little bit of walking, but the problem, not the good thing was that the distances are in small cities short. So we have a lot of cyclists, pedestrians, no increase in public transport, and of course some travels were omitted. Were not so. But this is also another problem. If we have too many people don't want to go to the city center because parking is not possible anymore, all the shop owners will claim that they have problems, business problems, and so on. This was not the case in Maribor. I was very surprised, actually.
Ah, really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. Professor Handy, how can small countries like Slovenia is, 2 million inhabitants, how can we use our size as an advantage when working toward fairer and greener forms of mobility?
Well, I have no experience with a smaller country, let alone a small state or even a small metropolitan region. I think our metropolitan region is as big as your country in terms of population. I don't know. I think that they probably have the answer to this, but it seems to me it could, on one hand, be easier, but on the other, maybe harder in some ways. But
okay,
yeah.
Maybe I can add a question that I already asked you, or all of you, about how the decision makers are listening to you. Another one for you, Dr. Rijavec. Now, how does the professional community, and you are part of the professional community, deal with political pressures? You know, when it comes, when road kilometers or miles are often valued more than the quality of life.
We are always under the pressure, I always said. Generally, I could say that we have two poles of pressures. That means plus or minus for less roads and plus for more roads. And generally, especially before the elections. So generally, we should think about that transport planning, especially in Slovenia, has, I would say, 3 or 4 levels. So if we start on the municipality levels, then when the mayors or they have their programs, so usually of 10 things, what they will do, 7 things, they will do something new on the roads, for especially. Interesting that only, as I know, only few measures suggest maybe better public transport or other things. They will say, okay, you have active transport, you can walk, you can use bicycle, and so on. And so this pressure, usually we deal how? So generally, we should demonstrate data. We should analyze the data to make some provisions, and if this data and analysis somehow are good, then we can support also the politicians or the decision makers. On the other hand, we should not, I would say, fake the data to demonstrate what they want to do. So pressure is important. So if we are professionals, then we should deal with real data. So this is important thing.
Thank you. So let's put a stop here and see what our audience, maybe they have any ideas or I hope questions for our audience. So if you have questions for our speakers, our guests, please just raise your hand, introduce yourself, and tell us who do you have a question for, and wait for the microphone. So does anyone have something to add what has already been discussed? It's like a lot of you here, some of you from younger, some of you older generation. I'm sure you have, please, thank you.
Hi, my name is Tom Rye. I'm part of the Transformative Transport Planning Research Group at the Urban Planning Institute of Slovenia and a professor in transport policy at Molde University College, Norway. Susan, could I ask you to tell us a little bit about something that you didn't talk about, which is, as I understand it from having talked to you earlier, the law in California, when you're planning a new highway project, requires an assessment of induced travel. Yeah? And that whilst that can't really stop the project going ahead, what it may do is mean that some alternatives or some other ways of managing that induced travel have to be proposed and funded. Could you explain to us how that law came about? Give a couple of examples of new projects, alternatives that it's funded, and then could the rest of the panel comment on how likely that kind of thing might be in Slovenia. So that kind of change in legislation. So actively planning induced travel in the planning of new infrastructure. And there we are. Is that a long enough question? Do you remember?
Yes. How much time? Do we have another
Thank
hour
you.
or two?
Enough. We are good.
Yes. So California, as I said, is trying to reduce driving. And it used to be that when we do an environmental impact assessment of proposed highway projects, that the environmental impact from a transportation standpoint was all about level of service, which isn't really an environmental impact at all. So the new law says that when a highway project is proposed, or in fact a land development project as well, you have to analyze what's the impact on vehicle miles of travel, and that has to include a full accounting of that induced travel effect. So there's been lots of controversy around how do we actually forecast what that increase in driving will be. But the end result is that once you figure out that number, then whoever's building the project has to mitigate that, meaning they've got to do other things that will then reduce that increased amount of driving. And so it appears to be a way to get funding for things like transit and bicycle projects, which could help to mitigate that increase in driving. And so it's a little, we don't know exactly how it's going to play out because this is all very new. But the project I mentioned in our area, a lot of the local officials supported the expansion of the highway because it was going to mean funding for transit and bicycle projects, that they otherwise had no way to get funding for those projects. So they were supporting the highway project to support, yes. And then the latest news is that there won't actually be any of that funding because the funding would come from tolls on the new lanes on the freeway, but all that money is going to have to go to maintaining the lanes. And yeah, so good idea in sort of theory and philosophy that we should be focusing on what are these impacts in terms of how much extra driving do we get. But whether it ends up doing anything meaningful from the standpoint of changing our investments in transportation, I don't know.
Dr. Plevnik, yeah.
I just want to add or point out the difference between California and Slovenia. Since you have official objectives on reducing driving, in Slovenia we are not discussing this. Even in preparing a climate strategy for Slovenia, the statement of the consultants was that they are not in favor of any obstacles to driving or to transport flows. So this is a big difference, and that is a very different starting point in discussing transport future of Slovenia, because you showed us that the reducing driving, the managing transport demand is one of the necessary points if you want to achieve those broad objectives, but we are not discussing this yet. Hopefully we will discuss this more in depth in our new national transport strategy, which is under preparation, but so far this was not on the table. Reducing driving was not among our objectives so far in Slovenia. This is an important point.
Why do you think that is? That it's not on the table. It's not like it doesn't get you points when there are elections. Why do you think that's
the core was explained in Susan's presentation today, because the values of the transport profession are speed, free flow, level of service, and these are all elements which are against any obstacles towards driving, and that's very lively in Slovenia, or very present in our profession. So this is the change we need. This is the shift we need in understanding that our future is in managing transport demand, not in providing more capacity of ever-growing, wherever it comes from, within the country, transit. We have to manage this. We cannot follow the pressure from all these levels towards our transport system. And the story of Switzerland is just telling us that it is possible as a country to object this pressure, these flows. There are possibilities. We have to defend other objectives, not follow only the flow speed and other values.
And I do want to clarify that we have policy about reducing driving, but that doesn't mean everybody believes that we should do that or that we will be able to do that. Yeah, so it's pretty controversial.
But there is a different, you have a policy.
There is policy, yeah.
Do we have another question for our guests? If you're coming from the faculty, I hear you get plus points when you'll come to the table for exams. I mean, it would be really interesting to hear some ideas or how things could change in Slovenia as well. One thing, a question for all of you, and maybe I am totally wrong, but a couple of you mentioned that the need for multidisciplinary approach to all things that we talked about. Was that the case, I don't know, 30, 50 years ago, or is this more like a last decade thing? Dr. Lep, maybe.
So this is very new approach.
Because it's not only, people from the faculty of geodetic engineering or only the transportation engineering, but also sociologists, anthropologists, I don't know.
Yeah, so 20 years ago, 30 years ago, this was the work for civil engineers and transportation engineers at all. And we were, our colleagues, and also we were very, very, very happy when somebody from other disciplines tried to ask some questions. And still today, my colleagues are sometimes not very happy
no.
if some other branches are trying to let's say, to discuss certain approaches like capacity, particularly capacity level of service, and external costs of transport, but not environmental costs, but lost hours because of congestion. So this is, but things are changing. We have a law and so on. So I think my colleagues...
The doors are open to many more
opening.
experts.
My colleagues are not happy, civil engineers and transportation engineers, that they must share actually the budget for transportation planning now. But it's the right direction, of course.
Professor Handy?
Yeah, I absolutely believe that we will only solve our transportation problems if we approach it in a multidisciplinary way. That it's not, engineering doesn't do it on its own. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Are your colleagues happy when others are trying to add some knowledge to these ideas of how the transportation system can change or be better? I mean, Dr. Lep mentioned that his colleagues are not very happy with this.
Yes, of course. Problem is because we have problems with the profession, so we are less and less, so we need to be multidisciplinary here in this case. On the other hand, especially public will, I will not kill us, but generally will push us, so generally we will have a lot of mentions, so on. So I think also the methodology of transport planning changed not in the case, maybe 20, 30 years. And so I could say somehow it's sort of evolution, which I could say. So we are thinking things we didn't did it before. So especially in the last decades, for example, we did a lot in Slovenia. We have some regulations, some laws on how to plan transport, especially in urban areas. maybe I miss this step on the European level. So, on the European level, we have many strategies which were maybe just printed and not realized. So probably we need this approach from top to bottom should be an advance on how, I don't know, what do you think?
I would open another point, which is that being a small country, we also have a small professional pool, and being oriented towards mainly road building in the past 30 years, we now have lack of expertise on public transport, on railway development, etc. So we think we should rely more on international expertise, since we have neighboring countries with faculties, professionals, researchers in fields that we are missing. So in the last few years, we have this approach that consultancies and some faculties are presenting them as we know enough to open such cases, but we see that the results are not in line with the latest results in other countries in Europe. So our suggestion would definitely be in the future projects on strategies on public transport, railways, we should definitely bring in expertise from abroad because our decisions are lacking this latest knowledge.
Thank you. Any question? Yeah, please just wait for the microphone.
Thank you. Magdalena Makar from Odres from Zagreb. I have a comment and a question. Regarding the multidisciplinarity, there is a comment. We are here with I'm here with the colleagues from Odres and also colleagues from the Faculty of Traffic and Transport Sciences from Zagreb. And we have a nice experience working with a multidisciplinary group of students during summer schools and workshops for students. So here now with us 20 students from different faculties from Zagreb University, and they are working now on the transport and planning solutions and challenges from the city of Zagreb. So it's nice to hear all the challenges and the approach that Professor Handy is telling us. And actually, and also thanks to our hosts, because we are learning from the example of Ljubljana and what's going on here, and also in the terms of citizen engagement. So my question is actually for the Professor Handy. You confirmed that we have to be creative, both in the approach of transport planning, but where are the citizens in California in the terms of involving them in the decision making and also transport planning? Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, excellent question. The citizens, what about them? Yeah, well, it's, California's a big, diverse state, and a lot of decisions get made at the city level. There are quite a few cities that are very interested in addressing these issues and are committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions and are changing both how they approach transportation, but also how they approach land use and enabling higher density development, which also helps to make transit more possible. And they couldn't be doing that if their citizens weren't also supporting that, right? At the local level, it's, the citizens have a very strong voice. So in some places that works in terms of promoting change, and then in other places there's a lot of resistance. The state of California is trying to we have policy in place that puts a requirement on every city to accommodate a certain amount of new housing, because we need lots more housing. And some of that has to be affordable housing. And not surprisingly, some of the much wealthier communities are resisting that very strongly. I'm not too worried that the citizen voice is not a part of this. But it plays out at the local level, and it makes it hard for the state to achieve some of its objectives because they're more removed from the citizens, right? So they're making these policies that they think are right for the state. But then at the local level, the citizens may resist that and push for other things. So they're definitely there. And sometimes it helps, and sometimes it makes it harder.
Thank you. Any other question? No? Otherwise, a question for you, Dr. Plevnik. What concrete, and this will be the last round, at least from me, what concrete steps should we take in the coming years to make transport planning truly more accessible and sustainable?
I think I've answered partly in my latest comment. So relying more on the international and exchanging more with international professionals. I think that's mainly it. But working with young generations, with new values coming into the profession, I think that's the future we are waiting for. So young generation bringing these new values into the profession, that might change a lot in our practice.
Do you see that there is, of course, there is difference between the older and the younger generation, but what are the questions maybe, just from your experience, that they are asking that maybe the older generation didn't or does not?
I think it's a better question to both. They are involved in educational programs. So.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Please, maybe you can continue, Dr. Jurek.
Usually some interesting questions. For example, why Ljubljana's capital doesn't have a metro, for example. So that's something we should explain many times. So generally also not the metro, but also the rapid public transport, for example. I will not say so. In California, the metro is rapid, for example, and people are using it. So problem is normally there is problem with the space in Ljubljana, not only space on the terrain, but also underground. We know that many Roman things. The Mona is under Ljubljana, so its mission is almost impossible. On the other hand, I don't know, archaeologists probably they would like to see but they see it when the Dunajska Street was opened. So maybe these are the questions. On the other hand, we should know, as I mentioned before, all the drivers are public stakeholders, so they want to know why things are not going faster in the way new roads, for example, because they are drivers, or in opposite, why we are not doing other alternatives like more bicycle roads and so on. So they are
that questions.
Yeah.
And Dr. Lip, in your opinion, in your experience, what do younger generations ask you most often?
So that's a very good question, because I think what is very typical for Slovenia is our demographic curve. We have twice as many older people like I am than young students, for example. And this is not the case in California, I guess, and in some other countries. And it is very, very, very difficult to change the system of value or the behavior of baby boom generation, like we are quite a lot of people here. And there is another problem that at the universities, at faculties, teachers are actually baby boom generation, so they are older. And they are somehow
more experienced.
Yes, experienced, but the system value they are selling actually is very often like we all agree that we should save our planet. The most pollution by transportation is caused by cars in congestion. So how we will solve our planet? Let's build new capacity that we. This is the lecture in the morning. The next lecture is some other approach. No, don't build it. because it will cost induced demand, and it is really a problem. At the end, the more charismatic professor wins, actually. And I guess this is our faculty the case that a lot of teachers still share the old system of value.
Okay, and what about the questions to you from the students in California?
Yeah, I think we have some of the same issue that it takes some time for turnover in the faculty to get new ideas into the classroom and train the students in a new way. But I think that's a really critical part of bringing about overall change, is change within our education system. And we're getting there.
Okay.
Some of us are retiring, and the new people will come in with new ideas.
Okay.
Yeah, and the students push us, too, because they'll,
Dr.
they challenge us.
Dr. Plevnik already told us some ideas, like what concrete steps should we take. What about you? Where do you see opportunities for Slovenia to move beyond its entrenched planning patterns in the years ahead?
Said those patterns are changing now. I would say more than dedicate 20 years or more. So I will not agree with your shifting gears. I will do something else. So I will somehow make this trip an evolution. For example. Because making shifting gears means a sort of revolution.
Good point.
A revolution. So, on the other hand, we should do with the methodologies we know today, not to change everything in opposites. So, on the other hand, we must think also on the threats, not only on the opportunities. If we shift or we will go very fast further, we change the paradigm of transport planning too fast, so that could happen that nothing happened then. So this is the possible scenario, and this is the worst scenario, if nothing happens. So generally we would like to have some progress, but that this progress is not so fast.
Thank you. We have another question from the audience, I hear. Please introduce. Okay. We have a gentleman there, and then we'll come to you.
Sorry. Hello, I'm Andrei Vucin from the spatial planning. I study spatial planning in Zagreb University. My question is for Dr. Hardy regarding, you mentioned that Europeans should come experience Los Angeles. And Los Angeles will host first the games for the FIFA World Cup, but more importantly, the Olympic Games 2028. And one would expect that it would accommodate public transport for visitors that come, especially those European ones that are used to some kind of degree of public transport. Could that be used to manage urban sprawl in Los Angeles for the inhabitants of Los Angeles for future, or will it just be used for transporting the tourists, the visitors, and then be cancelled?
Well, I think we will see, but certainly Los Angeles is using the World Cup and the Olympics as a push to invest in transit and improve the transit system. So, some years ago now, the citizens voted to increase their sales tax as a way to pay for really significant investments in the transit system. And they've made progress in improving it and extending it. It's still, I would say, highly inadequate to the purposes, but they're moving in the right direction. And I think I'm in Northern California, so I'm not in the middle of all that, but I think there are a couple of critical projects where there's now a question about whether they will get done in time. But I think I'm hopeful, and lots of other people are hopeful, that that this push really helps to get LA on something of a different path with respect to their transportation system. But we will see. I don't know.
Thank you. And now we have a question there. Please just wait for a microphone, please. Thank you.
Jaz sem tukaj čistko iz radovednosti, tako da upam, da ne bo sito quizzes filozofus manzises, ne, ampak bom vprašala takole. Dve reči nekako sem pogrešala v tem razgovoru, kolikor sem ga pač slišala. In sicer to je bilo podzemna železnica, ki jo je sicer na koncu zdaj omenil gospod profesor, pa jaz imam vizualizacijo Amerike polno taksijev. To se pravi, ali je v teh pogledih na promet taksi služba vključena na kakšen način in kako recimo v Sloveniji gledajo na projekt neke podzemne oziroma taksi službe, ki se tu že pri nas razširja.
Thank you very much. So the question is regarding the cab system in Slovenia. Does anyone want to answer what the question was?
Želite, da v slovensko ali angliško? So maybe I will try.
Yeah.
Okay, in English. So as I mentioned, taxi or cab service is the public transport generally all over the world, also in Slovenia. So it is now, I don't know how long, maybe you know how far, probably as it is in Slovenia. I don't know, in Nova Gorica the first cab driver was in 1980s, so for example, but not for Ljubljana, I don't know. Sorry. Probably in California before. The service didn't change in the past, so but as I mentioned before, in other countries, it's changed. So usually one drive, one invoice, one bill. It doesn't matter how many people are in the car using it. Then there were some ideas all over the Slovenia. I know, for example, in the city of Celje and the city of Trbovlje, they have the sort of taxi, shared taxi, I would say. That means that then the travelers, they share the taxi, but they share also the payment. So, and somehow this in our regulation at the moment is not possible. So this is the practical thing, but in regulation is not allowed at the moment.
Thank you. And we have time for one question left, and I believe we do have...
Yes, I'm here.
Okay,
Hi, my name is Matej Prabrnik. I'm with RTV SLO, which is a broadcaster, and also I'm active in two NGOs. One is local and one is international. I love attending events like this. I think we understand the concepts, but I'm always disappointed when I step out and the reality strikes me. And I have a question of something that you've mentioned in the round table. Slovenia is also obsessed with congestion, and we are solving that right now in the north of Ljubljana by adding 2 more lanes on a highway through Štajerska region. We have 4 professionals here. You know what you're talking about. I haven't read a lot of criticism of this project in the media, so I'm asking you to give me a prediction. What will happen? Will the road extension, will adding 2 more lanes improve the mobility, or will it make things worse? I think we should hear about that as well. So you can just improve or make things worse. It can be a short answer. Just I'm curious because I don't think that we are discussing that enough right now. Thank you.
Thank you. So, I don't think that was the question for Susan, since it's regarding the Slovenian
Zdaj, ker sem prej govoril, da so vse napovedi prometnih strokovnjakov napačne,
can you switch to English?
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Yes.
Sorry.
So because I discussed a few minutes earlier that all prediction or prognosis of transport professionals in the past were wrong, but I will try to answer what will happen. So we know that induced traffic exists, and we know if 1% of GDP growth produces 3% more trucks on our motorways. So, and I hope that some GDP growth will be there in this part of Europe. So we will have more and more trucks. So we will solve the problem of congestion a little bit for 3, 4, 5 years. And we will solve the problem of congestion caused by works or accidents. This will for sure be the case that accidents will not cause the dramatic congestions. But in 5 years, I will be retired then. At that time, I'm for sure that we will have approximately the same time losses on a motorway, and we will have additional problem in Ljubljana main roads, ring, and also former Titova, Dunajska, and all kind of roads, because we will have more cars entering the city. So some clever transportation planning is let's construct artificial bottlenecks somewhere where it hurts less than in the city center. So that should be approach for cities. So let's make like water, like a flood. You should stop the flood somewhere outside, not in the city. So I think in 5 years we will have the same situation on the motorway.
Thank you. We are almost up. Please, Dr. Plevnik, you wanted to
just want to add that we will have more cars and people in the congestion. The level of congestion will be the same, but the amount of people stuck in the congestion will be bigger, and the environmental and other impacts will be higher because more vehicle miles congested will result based on this.
Thank you very much. And with that, we are concluding our roundtable discussion. Thank you to each and every one of you, Dr. Plevnik, Dr. Jevec, Professor Handy, and Dr. Lep, for sharing with us your knowledge and your experience. It's been really interesting to listen to you. Let's please a round of applause for them. Thank you. And a brief practical note before we conclude. Participants registered through the Chamber of Architecture and Spatial Planning of Slovenia and the Slovenian Chamber of Engineers will receive their certificates by email. And now to formally conclude and close the event, I'd like to invite Dr. Luka Mladenovic, member of the Transformative Transport Planning Group at the Urban Planning Institute of the Republic of Slovenia and chair of the Institute's Scientific Council, for closing remarks. Please.
Yes, thank you. Just a few remarks, some thoughts from today's event that I think are worth taking home. So I think the message was clear. We need to think beyond the constant growth that it's projected, and we need to start thinking about managing this growth and maybe diverting it into the whole traffic system, not just the road network. What we heard today is that we can decide about the future we want, but maybe also that there is more than one future that we can decide from. It's not just the trends that are following, but there are different directions, and that we cannot decide for all of them, or for both of them. So we cannot have both decisions, just one, that there's room just for one. But to make this decision, an informed decision, I think we need to hear what different professions have to say about challenges we have and how to address them and what each of possible futures brings. So what the actual solutions are causing, if these are additional problems or actual solutions. So this is all. I hope we will meet again soon to discuss these challenges. I hope this event will not be just one. I think we need to sit together, confront our views, and find the decisions for future together. Thank you very much for participating, for joining us at this event, and hope to see you soon again. Thank you.